I really started thinking one day, okay, where do all the other small business owners go? If they do not have a brick and mortar, where do they go to conduct business? I previously was almost always on site with a client, either in their corporate office here in Franklin Brentwood or out in one of their regions. But when I was not doing that temporarily, you're working out of a coffee shop or you're working out of your house. And so it's very hard to have confidential conversations with employees. It's hard to do business development when you're in a busy coffee shop. If you can find a seat, and started looking around and something popped up. It was a co-working space down in Buckhead. And I thought, well, this looks interesting. Didn't really know a lot about co-working spaces or those types of things. And so called him up and went down and spent the day and thought, oh, this is really nice. I can see what draws business owners, and theirs was women only. I did not initially set out to have a women only co-working space, but it just sort of evolved. But when I went in and visited, I thought, this is Williamson County, Franklin, Brentwood. This demographic is a lot like the Buckhead outside of Atlanta, and thought surely we could use one of these. And, if you build it, they'll come.
In a corporate world where all employees have great leaders with no egos that create fun cultures where people can do their best work, the employees and companies thrive while doing great things for the customers, themselves, and each other.
Well, we know that rarely happens. I'm Jeff Palacio. I have been a leader for over 40 years for every t-shirt size company, from small 16 employees to extra large over 1 million. Please join me while I interview outstanding leaders that will share stories of great leadership and not so great. It will help you become a better leader while poking fun about all the crazy shit that happens in corporate America.
Hi, I'm Joe Deshawn, and welcome to the Corporate Couch with Jeff Palacio. Today, Jeff is interviewing Tammie Osborne. Tammie is the founder and CEO of the healthcare consulting firm Bridgemore IT Consulting, responsible for managing change and new technology adoption for multi-million-dollar projects. She is also the founder of the Sapphire Suite, a luxury co-working space catering especially to women in the Nashville, Tennessee area. Before starting her own business, Tammie had 30 years' experience in healthcare as an enterprise technology executive leader, EHR, EMR consultant, and a clinician. You can learn more about Tammie's businesses at bridgemoreIT.com and thesapphiresuite.com. Let's listen as Jeff talks to Tammie.
Tammie, I'd like to welcome you to the Corporate Couch today.
Thank you, Jeff. It's an honor to be here.
Yeah, very excited to talk to you. Actually, we're recording this in late September. We were introduced by Mary Mesner, and actually her podcast will be published next week on Monday. So that's I'm excited for that one, but I really appreciated it. So yeah, I always like to start off with a fun question. So you were to hang out for a day with anyone, Tammie, living or deceased, who would you pick and why?
Oh gosh, I didn't expect you to throw deceased in there. That may have changed the answer a little bit.
I'll give you two choices. How about one?
No, we'll go with living. We'll go with living. Elon Musk would be the person that I would hang out with.
And why is that?
I think he's innovative. He's very forward thinking. He just lives such an eclectic life. Obviously, he's running 3 major companies.
Right.
His days are probably insanely busy, and just the access that he has to intellectuals. And I love that he does not put limits on anything. If he imagines it, he doesn't say, is it possible? He goes out and starts looking for the right talent to make it happen. So I just think, what an amazing day. What his days just must be amazing.
Yeah, it must be. Yeah, you're right. It must be phenomenal. Definitely. Yeah, he's, he doesn't think of things growing at 2x or 3x or 5x. He thinks of 100x, to scale. So yeah, obviously one of the brightest people in the world today. So.
And culture. I'd like to see what his culture is really like, because of his personality and obviously the things that you see in public. it could be totally different in private, but I would really be curious to see what his corporate culture looks like at each one of his companies.
Yeah.
Because it could be different for all three. But I would love to see what his corporate culture looks like.
Yeah, that would be an interesting case review or whatever you want, or article in some business publication. Yeah, that'd be excellent. So you're in Franklin, beautiful Franklin, Tennessee today. Did you grow up in Tennessee?
I did not. I grew up in rural northeastern North Carolina,
Okay, North
just about
Carolina.
2 hours south of Richmond.
Okay, what was fun as a child? What did you love doing?
Oh gosh. Riding bikes with friends. We spent a lot of time on the water. We were 2 hours from the Outer Banks, so the weekends were usually spent at the campground. My dad had a place down at the campground close to the Outer Banks. And then at home, just a lot of time on the river on the weekends, water skiing. My stepdad was a big hunter, big fisherman. So just a country girl.
Yeah, I love that. So did you participate in any hunting and fishing yourself?
Yes, we
Oh,
did do a lot.
nice.
Am I going to get in trouble for
No,
saying that?
why? Is that bad?
No, no. Well, you just don't know in this day and age.
Right.
He was really big into, this is gonna sound so country, really big into like coon hunting, squirrel hunting.
Sure.
He did not do a lot of deer hunting. My dad and brother did a lot of deer hunting, but he did a lot of coon hunting. We always had coon dogs. We always had hunting dogs. And then he did a lot of fishing, a lot of heron fishing, which is very common there in that part of the state.
Yeah. I love country music. Are you a country music fan?
I am a country. I like all kinds. There's really only a couple I don't like, which would
Yeah.
be hard, heavy metal, hard rap, but I like all kinds, classic rock,
Yeah.
country music.
Okay. Who's your favorite country artist?
Luke Combs.
Uh-huh. Nice. Yeah, he's phenomenal. I'm based in Kansas City. I didn't go to the concert. He was at Arrowhead Stadium, which this past Sunday, we had another famous guest at Arrowhead Stadium watch a Chiefs game. It's Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce are dating. So that's been big news in Kansas City and worldwide, actually. So,
I heard that. I was watching that game, and that almost became the dominant theme, of the game instead of the game itself.
yeah, 100%. 100%. So growing up, did you have any aspirations when, a lot of kids will say, "Oh, when I grow up, I want to be this." What was this for you?
Oh gosh, Jeff, I wanted to fly jets.
Really? Nice.
I'm a goer. I love to go. My middle name is Joe, and my dad always teased me and said it should have been Go instead of Joe.
I love it.
But I wanted to fly jets.
Yeah, wow. And where did you get, I mean, was it a movie? Why?
I looking back, I think it's because we were so close to, so I grew up in northeastern North Carolina, but we were about an hour and 15 minutes from Norfolk, Virginia Beach. And so a lot of Navy, there in Norfolk. And looking back, sometimes I wonder if it's because they would do training exercises, and late in the afternoon, a lot of times those jets would fly over. A lot of times they were pretty low and you could hear them coming. And so sometimes just looking back, I wonder if that's what it was, thinking, man, that's about as fast as you can go right there. So I don't know. A lot of speed, a lot of control, but high risk. I'm not quite that high risk.
Have you been in a jet as a passenger?
Never, not one of those. No.
Yeah. I have never been either, but a lot of professional athletes get to go up there, or actors, and I don't have quantitative data on it, but I would say close to 100%, throw up during the voyage.
Yeah. You said when I was younger. I don't know that would be the
Yeah,
same.
right.
I don't know that I'd have that same desire now.
Yeah, exactly. So, you go to college. What was your college, and what was your initial major or final major?
So I went to a small junior college in northeastern North Carolina called Chowan College, and majored in accounting. Well, actually, I started off at Chowan. My major was accounting. I love math and thought, what a great way to spend my days. Just loved it, thrived on it. we got to income tax accounting, and I was like, no, thank you. This is not how I want to spend the rest of my life. Stuck in a corporate cube somewhere, not talking to anyone all day and just running numbers. Pass.
Right. So then where was you, what did you pivot to at that point?
Nursing. So right about the time that I was kind of having that realization about income tax accounting, had a great experience, had to go into the ER for something, had a great experience with an ER nurse, and thought, wow, what a great profession. She literally helps people all day. There is a lot of social aspect. I mean, she's literally interacting with people all day. And that is much more preferable to being stuck, in a corporate cube somewhere. And so pivoted to nursing school. And then, I always tell people I did it the long way. I did back in the day, you could get your licensed practical nursing degree. So I did an LPN program, which then did a bridge to an RN program, which allowed me to work as an LPN. I worked in a state psychiatric facility in Virginia called Western State Hospital, and pivoted, got my RN license, and then later on got my bachelor's degree from Old Dominion University out of Hampton.
Oh,
So
wow.
did that remote while I was working in critical care.
Wow. And so that one experience made a career decision for you.
It did.
Wow.
It did. She was wonderful, full of compassion.
Wow.
And of course, lots of things were happening in the background in the ER. It's like, oh,
Right.
this is exciting too. There's a lot that goes on in here. So
Yeah, actually, one of our daughters graduated from we had actually two daughters that go to nursing school, but one graduated and her first job was at an ER during the pandemic.
oh wow.
So she started right
Wow.
before the pandemic, and yeah, so it was very interesting. I mean, we had people that would not even want to be with her, because so many COVID patients were coming in the beginning to ERs, if you remember. So, yeah.
That added a whole new level of chaos to ERs. I was on a project at the time, and everything totally shifted. The focus of our project completely shifted to setting up tents in ER parking lots and setting up ways in which ER providers and nurses could leverage the technology to screen patients out in the parking lot under a tent. So it's just a whole new dynamic.
Yeah, so your career in nursing took a traditional route. You were a nurse, and that was about based on what I could put together about 13 years in that profession. So,
Yep.
and then you go to McKesson, right? And so you're a nurse, and now you made a pivot to, I'll say, corporate America. So what drove that change?
I had held a variety of positions in, as a nurse, from bedside care and critical care to working with a general surgeon and being a practice manager, which was a great opportunity for me. I learned a ton about that side of the house in terms of practice management and operations and billing and coding, and that whole side of the healthcare spectrum, is totally different than the bedside piece. And so learned that, and then took a leadership role with Mercy Health or St. Mary's Health at the time in Knoxville, and then after a few years did not want to necessarily manage people directly anymore, or do the bedside and on call and everything, and really sort of missed looking back at initially wanting to go into accounting. I think a lot of what also drove that is that love for the technology that was coming out. Computers were really starting to be a thing, and thought, well, certainly those software companies need folks with clinical backgrounds to tell them what we need the system to be able to do, as opposed to sort of the guys in jeans in the basement, building the software.
Right.
Surely they're hiring. Did not even know what the position would be called. Just knew that I wanted to help physicians use the technology to make things better for patients and for the whole experience, and patient outcomes. And so started Googling a couple of things and sort of pieced it together. And what kept popping up were these ads by McKesson to help physicians adopt new technology. And so fired off an email that had about 8 or 10 people on it, and probably within 30 minutes had 6 to 8 responses and interview requests. So
Wow.
made that transition to implementing and helping physicians adopt the McKesson physician product at the time, which I don't believe exists anymore.
Interesting. So and you had those email addresses based on your position at Mercy Health? Is that how you, or
There
how's
were
it look?
email addresses on the job descriptions. And
Oh,
so
oh wow.
it would say email,
Oh wow.
Beth@mckesson.com,
Oh
or
wow.
email your resume to Jeff@mckesson.com.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Wow.
I put a little paragraph together and blind copied all of them and sent one email.
Oh, really? That's great.
Well, and I left it very open. I just said, I'm a clinician, with this many years of experience in these areas, and including had helped with some project management in the organization and informally project management. And I'm looking to transition to healthcare technology. I'm willing to go back and get another degree. Which degree would you place the most weight on, or would you recommend? And rather than replying with school recommendations or degree recommendations, they replied with requests for interviews.
Wow. That's
So in
great.
about 3 months, I had a new job.
Wow. So you transitioned after, working, in hospitals and other healthcare facilities. What was your biggest surprise when you started working at McKesson?
It was a big adjustment. I was traveling all over the country. My kids were 4, 3, and 1 at the time, so that was a huge adjustment. I think for me, and McKesson was a great company to work for. I'll just say that I love that. I worked for them a year. I think the biggest adjustment for me was how slow things moved. All the red tape, and as consultants on the project, we would identify issues, but it seemed like it just took forever to get changes made or approved. And so it's like, gosh, how do these big companies, how do these big corporations move quickly? They definitely are not agile. My gosh, how do they make progress? Because things seem to move so slow.
Right. You love McKesson, great company, but you moved on after a year. What was the thought process behind that, and where'd you go?
When I took the position at McKesson, like I said, my kids were 4, 3, and 1. In fact, when I interviewed, I did not let them know that I had kids. The hiring manager, I did
Right.
not. And the agreement at home was, if you're going to be on the road traveling Monday through Friday every week, is that we will give it a year, 2 years max. And so literally 1 year to the week, a position opened back up at Mercy, and it was in the IT department as opposed to the clinical. And so stepped back into a role there, implementing cardiology technology, which having been a critical care nurse, cardiology really was sort of that first love on the clinical side of things. And so went back into a role implementing. They had just purchased a lot of things for the cath lab and new technology. And so I was able to go back into that role.
To get an IT type job without really IT background, did you think you were able to go back to Mercy because you had worked there before and established such a great reputation?
I think that was part of it. I think that I had really good relationships with leadership. At the time, there were probably, I think there were 6 hospitals in the system. And we were part of Catholic Healthcare Partners out of Cincinnati. And so they were specifically, I think, looking for someone with a clinical background to come into that role, because to be able to step into the cath lab and have credibility with the nurses and the providers and leadership in there, having that clinical background is, I think, really what made the difference.
Yeah. And so, I mean, having a healthcare IT experience is phenomenal. So,
And they were a McKesson shop also. St.
okay.
Mercy was a McKesson shop. And
Yeah.
so
So when did you get the first inkling to start your own company? When you did, I know you started Bridgemore IT Consulting in 2012. So when was that kind of seed planted?
when I went back into Mercy Health, I still want to call it St. Mary's, but when I went back into Mercy Health, took that role, and a couple of really big initiatives came down the pike. As far as we did a merger and acquisition with Baptist Health System, took on a large role on that project. And then eventually Mercy restructured and went to a more corporate model and regional model. And so being in that role, I became the leader in the Knoxville area for our IT department. And I was signing invoices one day, and some McKesson invoices came across my desk. And when I looked at consultant bill rates and thought, wow, I don't I don't think, this is not exactly what I was making when I worked,
Right,
for a software company. And
right,
so if they can bill me out at that, I can bill me out at that as well. And I really missed consulting. I think
right.
there's something I loved the consulting aspect where you're not caught up in all of the office dynamic and all of that. And you can go in and make recommendations for best practice and based on your experience. And as long as that flight leaves, at 4 o'clock on Thursday, you're out of there. So I missed that and I knew that at some point, I didn't expect it to be that soon, but I knew that at some point I had always thought that when my kids are grown, I will return to the consulting world. But that opportunity, then came up and went for it.
Wow. Yeah, you didn't need a accounting degree or background to understand that if they're billing out at $300 to $400 an hour and you weren't getting paid that, there's an opportunity there.
And I know there's a lot of other costs that
Right. Yeah. Right. Right. Yeah. But the McKesson brand adds a little dollar amount to that also, right?
the freedom of it and the freedom of it,
Yeah.
that sort of to not to do things your way, so to speak, but when you see things and you think there's a better way to do this, being able to have the ability to do it that way.
Yeah. Walk me through then the process, and you have this idea, and then at some point you name the company, um, and so walk me through the process there.
So first of all, we just created the website, started coming up with that, but the first thing you need as a consultant is a contract. And so I started looking, just really searching the web as if I was looking for a job, in terms of what opportunities were out there, and connected with a recruiter online, and she had an opportunity at Community Health Systems that she thought would be a good fit for me, and interviewed with her, and then was invited to come down and interview like the week before Christmas. Invited to come down to Franklin and interview with leadership at Community Health Systems.
So you specifically went to look at contract roles in your space. Wow. Yeah. So that was the start. Okay. So now you start your new company. So you haven't been a founder CEO before. What was your biggest surprise after 6 months with your company?
Well, it was, I will say, easy in the beginning. It was because most of the large corporations, they have preferred vendor lists, those types of things, and you don't just walk in as a solo and get a contract.
Right.
It wasn't nearly that easy, and it took I spent about 3 months looking for that initial contract, and so actually subcontracted through another vendor company that had an established presence there with Community Health Systems. But then I think just the responsibility, and again, it's easy in the beginning when it's just you're the CEO of you.
Right.
But I think just all of the new things of starting a business in terms of requirements, insurance requirements, licensing, all the legal things, contracts, et cetera, that come along with that. More than just a website.
Right. Tim, you've had a lot of different leadership roles and, a normal progression, right? Where you start out as an individual contributor and then you over time become responsible for a team and then obviously for you, a founder and a company. Who are some of your leadership mentors, whether they be, people that you knew or just people that you read their work or something like that? What inspired you as a leader to learn?
I've always been blessed, Jeff, with great leaders. I had a vice president of nursing at Mercy Health that I looked up to and admired her leadership style. I had a chief nursing officer that when I made the decision to leave Mercy Health to go to McKesson, part of that process is because they were a McKesson shop, you had to have someone from executive leadership sign off, saying that they had not, recruited you away from a client. And when I approached her about that, she immediately said, I support you 100%. Basically encouraged me to take that position, to leave the organization, to grow. And then her thought process behind that was I would go get that new skill set and then bring it back to the organization and make the organization better with it, which I was blessed to be able to do that in terms of to go back into a role, at that organization. But I had a great CIO who always encouraged, new ideas and innovation. And he would roll up his sleeves and get on a whiteboard with you and help you solve it. I never had a no leader. I had a great leader that I worked with at Community Health Systems as well. I thought he was a great team leader. He created a culture where his team trusted him and respected him. That was great to watch also. But I did learn from the one CNO that I was telling you about. A lot of times when people go to leave an organization, leadership will discourage it or not necessarily make it easy.
Right.
And she made it and we're still friends to this day in terms of we mentor each other to this day.
Yeah, I mean the great leaders want you to thrive and fulfill your purpose and potential. So I think that's it's very important. Where I think the leaders that don't do that, it impacts their ego because, oh, you're leaving me, and I take that as a ding against me versus taking the a more empathetic approach to be a great leader. So
yeah, I mean, and they encouraged growth.
Yeah.
Because it does it makes your team better, makes the organization better. It makes their job easier, I think, as a leader.
Well, and it makes their team stronger because you want people on your team to want to be there.
Right.
So the leaders that, don't give a promotion or, block it, internal, obviously, that person is going to eventually leave the company or have to wait out, not reporting under that leader, right? I mean, because they're not happy. They wanted to go.
Right. And she went from leader and supervisor to friend. And now I view her more as a colleague. Obviously, we're both have been in the nursing profession, and she went on to become CEO of a hospital. And she's someone that I value, a great deal now in terms of if there's a decision that I need to make or a professional decision, she's someone that I would pick up the phone and call. So we have those conversations pretty regularly.
So you're, basically about 6 years into your company, or maybe there'd be 8 years into your company, and the pandemic hits. So tell me, what was that like, and how did you handle the pandemic?
Well, for someone who's used to being on a plane and being on the go and traveling all over, it was miserable. I'll just say that right up front.
Right.
No bones about that.
Yeah.
It went from I was working on a project, I was traveling to Florida, to Plantation, Florida every week. So, there were worse places that you could travel. And then the pandemic hit, came off the road for a few months, and then took another project. And that just after about 6 or 7 months, sitting behind a computer screen in the dining room at home, I am a big champion for change management and relationship management. And I think to manage any large initiative, relationships are the key, especially large initiatives where you're running into issues and you're navigating challenges. I think having key relationships with senior leaders and decision makers can make or break your project and the success of it. And I find it's very difficult to do that sitting behind a computer screen in the dining room. I would much prefer to be walking down the hallway of a hospital or at the coffee pot with one of the senior executives where you've built a personal relationship and maybe you're asking about family or something fun that happened over the weekend. I think that becomes the difference then when you have an issue and you can pick up the phone and call that leader and say, I need your help. We're having an issue with this particular physician or this particular IT leader, and I need you to remove this barrier. I think it's very difficult to create those types of relationships, again, just sitting behind the computer screen at home. And not only that, I had teenagers in the house on Zoom. I had a husband who was doing real estate, and when it got to the point where I felt like I could recite his pitch, Like something's got to give. I can't do this anymore.
Yes, the listening in on your partner's calls, we've experienced that as
Yes.
well. So yeah, that's interesting. So I mean, obviously, you know, raising kids is you know, a joy and yeah, you know, and hard work. But I mean, what was your process to kind of, you know, you and your husband, you know, you're traveling every week, your kids are in their, you know, late single digits, early, you know, double digits while you're starting your company. Well, I mean, what was your process like? I mean, how did you balance everything going on?
Well, it definitely takes two. And we were fortunate enough that at that time, and he's a little bit older than me. So in the early years before kids, we moved a couple of times to, you know, for his career.
Mhm.
And so he was very, you know, when the opportunity presented itself for me, he was very supportive of that. And we were fortunate in that his background as an educator, when we moved out to the Franklin area, obviously he couldn't just step right into an administrative role that he was used to. And so he went back into the classroom. Um, but that also gave him a tremendous amount of flexibility. And so his schedule was pretty much the same schedule as as the kids. And so that allowed us to really just kind of tag team. And so he would kind of take things Monday through Thursday. And then when I got home on Thursday night, uh, over the weekend, I would take a lot of the load. Um, and our kids were, I guess our kids were elementary, late elementary, early middle when we moved out to Nashville, really, when I went back into consulting. And uh, fortunately, with community health systems, I was not on the road, you know, for the most part, the first few years. That was occasional travel to go out to a
Right.
region or to a market. And I was fortunate also to have a position with Steward Health, which was IASIS at the time, and then Life Point. And so obviously those being based right here in Franklin and Brentwood. Um, but it definitely takes two. And obviously as we got into technology, you know, I would text with the kids a lot. Um, Always try to make it home for the big events, and was fortunate that I had some flexibility even though I was on the road.
Did you feel it was a advantage or disadvantage being a female in the IT healthcare space?
I think at times it's a disadvantage. I think it depends on the role. I think if you're in sales, that, you know, there's a different component to it. If you're in sales, you know, sort of the after hours activities. I think if you're a female, most leadership positions in IT are male, although that's shifting, obviously.
Mhm.
In the early days, you know, when I first went into it, I think there were majority male. So I really think it depends on the role. I think if you're in the department, again, females, most are clinical if they're in the IT department. So I think there's a lot of respect in when you're in an IT position, if you have a clinical background or if you're a female in the IT department, in my early years anyway. So there's a balance.
Mhm.
I think if you're in a sales position, it's a little bit different. It's easy for you to do business development, and that can present challenges. It's easy, I think, for you to do business development when you're dealing with other female executives. I think you have to be more, you have to plan more when when it's a male executive.
Right.
I'm not sure if that answered your
No,
question.
no. I mean, it's just
But
interesting. I mean, I
it's a
just,
different dynamic.
yeah. Well, yeah, and I work with IT. I started my career in IT, but then was the primary business partner the majority of my career for on the sales and marketing side with the IT counterparts. And you know, it's very male dominated, right? So I was just curious from the healthcare IT perspective, it was the same. You know, I think it would be great that you were a nurse, obviously, because you bring an insight that, you know, few have unless they were a nurse also, right? So
I like the balance. I think it's great having male and female. I love to see teams that are healthy that have a balance of males and females because different perspectives. We think differently, we work differently, we lead differently. And so I love to see a balance of both. I don't think any team should be, you know, all male or all female or that type of thing. I love to see a good balance.
absolutely. Um, So, in the midst of a pandemic, you decide to start a company, a new initiative, because you weren't busy enough being the CEO of a IT healthcare consulting firm. So, take us through that process, Tammy.
Well, do you remember when I said I could recite that pitch?
Yes.
And so I really started thinking one day, I thought, it's twofold. I really started thinking one day, okay, where do all the other small business owners go? Where do they, if they do not have a brick and mortar, how do they conduct, like, where do they go to conduct business? If I'm not, I previously was almost always on site with a client, either in their corporate office here in Franklin Brentwood or out in one of their regions. But when I was not doing that temporarily, you're working out of a coffee shop or you're working out of your house. And so it's very hard to have, I think, confidential conversations with employees. It's hard to do business development when you're in a busy coffee shop. If you can find a seat, or if you have to pack all of your stuff up to go to the restroom and you come back and your seat's taken, then what do you do?
Right.
And started looking around, and something popped up on one of my social media feeds one day, and it was a co-working space down in Buckhead, outside of Atlanta. And I thought, well, this looks interesting. Didn't really know a lot about co-working spaces or those types of things, and so called him up and went down and spent the day and thought, oh, this is really nice. And I can see what draws business owners, and theirs was women only. And I did not initially set out to have a women only, co-working space, but it just sort of evolved. But when I went in and visited, I thought, this is Williamson County, Franklin, Brentwood. This demographic is a lot like the Buckhead and outside of Atlanta. And thought, surely we could use one of these. And, if you build it, they'll come.
There you go.
So I came back and started looking for commercial space, and spent about 6 or 8 months looking for commercial
Wow.
space. That proved much more difficult than I anticipated.
Why was that?
Well, I thought that because of the pandemic and so many storefronts closing, that people would just be throwing commercial property.
Right.
It was very difficult to get a broker to return a call, not a proven concept. They were used to the big box, I think, space, e-spaces and those types of things at the time, but a concept like this was not very familiar at the time. And so the typical response was, we don't want office space in that location. It's not traditional office space.
Interesting. But it finally got a deal done. Yeah.
I did. I found an empty space, and a guy was walking on the sidewalk who owned one of the other businesses in the building. And I said, how did you get your space? He gave me a contact info. I called the guy and said, I need you to help me broker this deal. I can't get a return call. I can't get a meeting with them to do a pitch and to walk through the concept. I had a beautiful slide deck and all the things I thought I needed, but couldn't get a meeting. And so he got that. He had relationships in the industry, so he got the meeting for me.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously they had never done this before, but, did you hire like an interior designer, for the space, and kind of what was obviously you're good with project plans because that's part of your business, but what kind of, what outside advice did you get, and what type of advice was it for?
So I sketched it out. Once I found the open space, I had a vision in mind of, I knew what functionality that I needed as far as private meeting rooms, big open co-working area, obviously having a feminine touch to it. I wanted a big, like a sort of a, not your typical break room, or,
right.
So drafted it out, sort of sketched it out on a notebook, found an architect and had him get it sort of code ready for me. And then got a referral for a general contractor, and we signed the lease and started the building process. I did have a friend great interior designer. She helped in the early days of getting sort of pulling things together so that I could focus on construction and ordering furniture and all of the things to sort of make that vision come to life. So we opened in June of 2022.
And business has been good?
Business has been good. We have 61 members. We are also, just because of the decor and the design of our space, we're also a venue and event space. For example, yesterday we had 60 women in a group of CPAs who were having their yearly workshop to get their CEUs, or their continuing education.
Sure.
And so they booked our space yesterday and did a workshop all day long, which they live streamed to their other members across the state. We have a couple of bridal showers coming up this
Oh,
weekend, and
nice.
baby showers. So everything from dinner parties to holiday parties to social events to corporate retreats.
So if a male business traveler stumbles upon the Sapphire Suite at 10 a.m. saying, "Oh, yeah, this looks like a great place for me to huddle up to my meeting at 4 o'clock today," what happens?
He absolutely can book a space. So we have our co-working side, which is for our members. And then the other 2/3 of our space is meeting rooms, conference rooms. We have a couple of beautiful board rooms, what we call Zoom rooms. We can do a desk for a day. We can do an office for a day. And those are open to members, non-members, male, female,
Okay.
arranged.
So did you model yourself after any of the, the WeWorks, the Grid? I'm trying to think of some of the other ones that are out there. Did you do any of that, or it was just all your own kind of thinking and thought process?
I did not really model after them. And I think, when you asked me earlier, initially it did not start out to be women owned, but I did visit, just because my husband and I had a meeting for a business transaction at one of the big box spaces. And so while we were in there, of course, I had come home and said, "Hey, I have a business idea. And what do you think?" And same, they just weren't a thing, 3 years ago, quite as much.
Right.
And so the day that we went to meet with a closing, like a real estate closing attorney at the big base, I said, "What do you notice?" And there are hardly any women here. So that's kind of how we landed on,
Right.
gearing the space towards women. So I think they're all similar in terms of, you have a space to work, you can book rooms, you can, different things like that. But really what we wanted to create was the feeling of working at home without the distractions of working at home.
Yeah.
So we have our co-working tables are dining room tables. Our boardroom tables are dining room tables. They're not the typical industrial style table that you would see
Yeah.
in
I
a
love
big
it. Yes.
space. So there's something for everybody, it just
Yeah.
depends. If you're in town,
I know. I was just thinking that if I'm in town, I definitely have to go.
you have options. You can go across town, or you can, come with us for a day.
Yeah, no, I love that. So, I mean, how do you kind of prioritize your time, between the two businesses?
So with my healthcare IT with Bridgemore, I have a wonderful VP of operations. She lives in Cincinnati. She is, we're on the Department of Defense project, which was a great, thing for us as a small business partner. We were invited by Cerner to participate in that project as one of their small business partners. They were a client of ours at the time. So that was a great thing for us. And she pretty much handles all of those relationships. She does our recruiting. I joke and just say I just have to sign the paychecks and deal with any HR issues that come along, which fortunately are few. But that really is, I don't fret over that on a daily basis. My days are typically here, but my time is probably divided 60/40 during the week. 60% here with the co-working space, 40% tracking and keeping up with things with Bridgemore.
Yeah, that's great.
Having good team members, that's the key.
Yes, 100%. It's the key to success. Totally agree with that. Tammy, there's two groups I love to help with leadership advice from exceptional people like yourself. One is recent college graduates as they try to navigate their first job search as well as the start of their professional career journey. What advice do you have for them?
For new graduates, I would say the power of networking. Do not underestimate the power of networking. This is something I now have a freshman in college and a junior in college, and they are starting to think about internships. At least the junior is. And so I would tell them build relationships with fellow students, build relationships with professors, leverage your parents' connections. There are several of my daughter's friends that I've, watched grow up, and now watching them as juniors in college and thinking about what their next steps are in their career. I would recommend them 100%. So what I try to tell mine is, leverage build good relationships, and the power of networking. I know in high school they would apply for jobs, and the answer would be, well, we applied on Indeed. And maybe I'm old school, but I would say, dress up. I don't care if you're applying for a server job, dress up, drive down there, go in, ask for the manager, shake their hand, introduce yourself. I think some things have become too much online, but I would just say to appreciate the power of networking.
It's interesting. I last semester, the spring semester, I taught at the University of Kansas, and a colleague, was trying to tell what's going on in class and getting some advice, because that was the first time I had taught in a long, long time, in a collegiate setting, and he gave me advice saying, these are the students, the young adults that came through the COVID period where they were doing Zoom courses only. Did you notice with your, junior and freshman in college, their socialization skills are a little less because of the Zoom period during the pandemic?
100%, 100%. And I think like all of us that have kids, your kids are, they're wired differently. And my junior, my daughter, that's my daughter. She, well, I have two daughters, I should say. My oldest one she's 21, and that's the one, she has Down syndrome, so she's home with us. But my junior in college, I think she's more wired for remote, self-motivated, she has more control over it. She works at her own pace, that type of thing. She can put, as much into it. I think it impacted my son more from the lack of socialization. It's too easy to isolate. It's too easy to get caught up in video games and not having to be anywhere and not having to, get dressed up, show up, that type of thing. I think it definitely impacted him more. And it will be interesting, as and you and I have had a previous conversation about hybrid versus remote. It will be interesting to see as things start to shift back towards in person. I don't think we'll ever go back to the way things were before, but it will be interesting to see how sort of the COVID generation of kids or students transition. If they're in a position where someone says, no, you have to be in the office 5 days a week, 8 to 5. I'm not sure they will survive.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think I don't know if the companies that do that, I'm not sure that's the best strategy, but they're probably not going to ask me.
And I think you have to do what works for your company. I think you have to do what works for your company and what works for your employees. But I do think the kids that have come out of sort of the COVID are going to struggle if it's a position that requires in office.
Yeah, totally agree. The second group I love to help is, once you start your career, usually an individual contributor, but then you get the manager role, and now you're responsible for people and sometimes the strategy, or at least your performance reviews, and people are going to come to you for their issues. Mostly professional, but they could even be personal issues. So what advice, Tammie, would you have for them as they begin their leadership journey?
Leverage the power of the team, leverage the talent that's on your team. You don't have to have all the answers. I think a lot of time it's natural when you move into that role to think that, you have to know everything. You have to have the final answer on everything. And if I had to do that over again, I would definitely leverage sort of the skills of the team, and, find a leader that you respect and ask them to be a sounding board for you, or a mentor, put whatever label on it that you want, but ask them to be a sounding board for you so that when you have challenges, you can come to them in a safe place to be able to say, hey, I don't know. And, we have this issue with the team. I'm struggling with this. How would you handle this situation? And slow to hire, quick to fire.
There you go.
Oh, that's probably the biggest one.
Well, Tammie, you've had a great career. I love the whole nurse transition into the healthcare IT space, and I can't wait to visit Nashville and to come into the Sapphire Suite. If I can find the wine or the beer fridge, that's going to be good for me.
We do have one of those. And we have an under the counter cabinet. So,
Love it. Tammie, thank you so much for being on the Corporate Couch today.
thank you, Jeff.
I'm not sure what I love best about Tammie, that she wanted to meet Elon Musk, or that she wanted to fly jets as a child. No, in all seriousness, what a career. I mean, she pivoted from accounting to nursing because she had an experience in the ER, and this wonderful ER nurse so inspired her that she became one. And then she works, I think it was about 12 years in the nursing field at various hospitals, and then pivots to McKesson, which, one of the largest medical supply companies in the world. And then just decides, she leaves McKesson, works at a hospital kind of from the IT perspective, looks at what McKesson consultants are billing. And she said, well, I never made $350 an hour.
I could take a piece of that.
Let me start my own company in the, so being an early female exec in the IT healthcare space, I just thought it was a phenomenal journey. But what did you take out of it?
Oh, it was exactly that, the pivoting that goes on. And then so that she started a consulting company, and you think, okay, I'm at the top of my world now, heading up this consulting company. Oh, I think I'll just start another company in an industry that I know absolutely nothing about. I think that's amazing that kind of fortitude exists inside of some people. And boy, it's definitely inside of Tammie. So she goes out and says, I'm going to go into the co-working space, which was an industry I think she barely even knew existed. Visited some co-working spaces in Atlanta, and then had to research it on her own, and said, wow, this looks like something that would be interesting to start as a company. And apparently it's doing very well. So I think that's just amazing that there are people out there that can be that late in their career and start something completely from scratch, from something that they have virtually no experience in, and then be successful about it. Kind of makes you wonder what her next thing would be.
Right.
I think I'll start a company in blah, blah, something else that she'd never heard of. And
starting it in a pandemic.
Oh, yeah. By the way.
Just a minor detail.
I
know nothing about this industry. It's a pandemic that we've never seen before. And start a company.
And of course, we have the hindsight to know kind of how the pandemic panned out, if you will. But if you remember that 3-some years ago, we didn't know what was going to happen. We didn't know, is this the new norm? Is the world ever going to be like this? What's coming around the corner again? So yeah, it was an amazing story.
So Joe, any leadership wisdom you want to give our listeners?
We're going to go to a famous baseball philosopher named Tim McCarver. And one time when he was talking about the great pitcher Bob Gibson, he said, Bob Gibson is the luckiest pitcher I ever saw. He always pitches when the other team doesn't score any runs.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Corporate Couch. If you enjoy the podcast, I would love for you to take 2 minutes out of your day to rate us 5 stars and write a review. Please join me next week to learn from another great leader sharing their professional journey and insights.